Episode 133 of the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Welcome back. This is Jeremy hosting this first part of our episode, and then I'll be interviewing Sid Coop and Lisette Fraser as a part of today's conversation. And today we get a chance to answer a question that actually came in from one of you. So if you're listening and you're a volunteer youth worker, you're in the trenches of ministry, and you've got a question that you're like, I kind of wish somebody would train me on this or give me some answers around this particular topic, you can definitely send us a message. We would love to hear from you, and we would likely feature your question on a future episode. That's the whole point behind what we get to do here. It's answering the practical questions that you, the frontline volunteer, are asking. So the best way to do that is we have a link in the show notes. You can fire us a note there. You can also email me directly. I'm jeremy@youthworker.community, and I would love to feature your question. So today's conversation came in from a listener, and it's all about mentoring students that get involved in sports. And we recognize that, hey, in youth ministry, there's things that pull students away from our programming, and sometimes it's sports, sometimes it's other things. But what do you do when you're kind of called to mentor maybe even that student, and you're thinking, gosh, how can I be helpful for them even when they're absent? So that's today's conversation. We're going to jump into that in a second. But before we do, want to make sure that you know that our partnership with Trinity Western University is what makes this podcast possible. And so we are so grateful for them. If you haven't checked them out, by all means, we've got the link in the show notes. And now is a great time of year if you've got a small group, especially of grade 12 students, that you can be asking them questions about where they're applying for school next year, if they're planning on going to a particular institution next year for higher education, what they're doing for maybe some scholarship type of stuff. This is kind of the time for it, and coming out of Christmas break. And so if you know a few different places that could be helpful, places like Trinity Western that actually invest in the spiritual life of their students, it'd be great for you to have that in hand so that you can kind of offer that as options. And they've got a number of great programs as well. So perhaps your students, the things that they're looking for, they could train and be equipped for at Trinity Western, and that would be a great connection for you to make for them. Well, for right now, though, let's jump into today's conversation that I got to have with Sid and Lisette.
Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers. So we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
All right, everybody, Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast here. This is Jeremy hosting the conversation. I have Sid Coop and Lisette Fraser, who I want to do just a brief introduction in case you are a new listener to make sure you understand who we're talking to. Sid, why don't you start us off? Tell people who you are, where you're coming from in this conversation.
Well, Jerry, I know you want a brief. I was really excited to talk about my wife, who happens to be like the executive director of Green Bay Bible Camp, but I know that's not who we're actually introducing here. So my name's Sid. I get to be a part of the youth worker community. I love it. I live in Kelowna, British Columbia. And Jer, I get to work with you and Lisette, which is like huge joy to me. So this is like the best day ever.
Now, Sid, we should reference you are in the trenches youth pastor at a couple different churches throughout your career. And so we're super grateful for the experience that you bring in those conversations. And now you do get to talk with youth pastors, youth workers all across our country, Canada, and a little bit beyond. And then because of the title, we should also tell people you are an amateur athlete. Would that be the right way to say it? Now raising semi-pro athletes?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think amateur athlete for me would be absolutely appropriate. Very amateur, maybe armchair amateur, that kind of thing for sure. But hey, just for the conversation, sports has always been a really significant part of our family. And let me just quickly contextualize it for a second. My dad grew up in a Mennonite home and actually got kicked out of the church for playing football on Sundays. So there's some context right there for us. But then he kind of reacted the other way and said, we're going to be a family that's engaged in community through sports. So my whole life, this has been a really significant part of our journey. And, in light of the question you're going to ask, I remember the very first Sunday, my mom was a nurse. She had to work Sunday morning that week. And Dad allowed me to play hockey on Sunday morning for the very first time when I think I was 13. And it almost blew up our home when my mom found out. So we've been in this mix on this conversation ever since the get-go.
Okay, that's helpful. Good. And then Lisette, talk to us. Who are you? Where are you coming from today?
Hey, this is so fun because I am excited. I get to hang out with you guys. I'm Lisette. I've been a pastor for more years than we want to discuss today. I'm coming from Atlanta, Georgia, this fine day.
And
Yeah,
there
and by
are
the way, I think
we know
hey,
sports
I'm
are
in
a
here
thing
right
in our
now.
country. No, no, no. You want to say something, Sid?
Yeah, I
I
do, because I just want to actually just say this. Lisette and I got to do camp work. Like Lisette, what would that be? 15, 20 years ago?
Oh,
And
at
it's
least
like,
20, unfortunately.
I think it's 20 now. When we
Yep.
got, yeah, camp work in Canada at a small little camp in central Alberta, which is super fun. So there's all sorts of
So
weird
fun.
history going on here. It's
So much
great.
weird history. And I'm down for this conversation because I don't know if you guys even know this. We owned a volleyball club for a while. And
Come
so
on.
we were. And then Kyle's brother, my husband's brother, played professional volleyball. So we've been around this game, this conversation for a few minutes ourselves.
Well, and
amazing.
Jay, you were going to say Lisette's from the southern states, so probably the weight in this conversation is even more significant than what we experience up here in Canada, unless we're playing hockey. If we're playing hockey, man, then we
Correct.
rule the day. Yeah.
All day.
All right. So as you know from the title, we are talking about sports. How do you mentor students who don't attend regularly because of their sports? This is actually, so you guys know, a live question from a youth worker that wanted us to challenge this conversation because it's a constant opportunity challenge in our youth ministries. You know, we're talking to volunteers. You've got students in your small group who are technically a part of your small group, and yet for a chunk of the year, they're really irregular. And so, what's your responsibility? If you care deeply about them, how do you mentor them? How can you shepherd them? What can you do as their small group leader? Even though when you show up to the program, lots of times they're not there because they're at the rink or on the pitch or on the court. Someone like that. So, Sid, go for it. Talk to us about what are some early ideas here.
Yeah, so there's just a couple of tensions that I'm playing with in my brain. Number one, I know that physically showing up for like programmed experiences with the church and the youth group can be really shaping for a young person. So I just want to say right now, like I'm so for that consistent engagement, making a commitment and sacrificing for it. So there's on one side, I have that tension that I think is really important. On the other side, we also really want our kids to be involved in community and in activities within the community, and for them to be thinking about like their missional call in that space and presence. And so I think there was a time, Alyssa, and I don't know if this was your experience, but there was a time when I was just starting in youth ministry where there was a theory that kids should quit everything and just come join our leadership team at our youth group. And I felt a dissonance for that with me because I thought we actually wanted our kids to be living missionally with their friends in their activities and their environments and not just
Yep.
isolating away. So I always found that to be kind of a significant tension, if you will, in that conversation.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa. What were we gonna say?
No, I was just going to say 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So there's a couple of things that come through my mind here right away. So when I was a small group leader, I had a group of basketball players that were part of my small group, and I knew during the basketball season that Tuesday night youth group was really tough for them because they either A had practice or they had games. And so I wanted to be with them. And what we did is we decided in our youth ministry that our students weren't there to serve our program. Our program was there to serve our students. And if we could do it without affecting the whole of our youth group in a negative way, we would allow small group leaders to shift the way they connected with their kids outside of our normative program moments, but we wanted to hold them accountable to continuing to disciple those kids. So for me, it just meant I changed when I met with my guys weekly as far as small group went. And the whole small group actually shifted with it for us. So we had a really good little community. So we would meet early mornings, do Bible studies together, and then we would actually try to be at the games or activities that our kids were at to support them. And there was two things that I was looking for. I was looking, one, to mentor my kids who were on these teams, but two, to keep them a part of the community as well. So when our community could be a part of that experience, that was really important. I was in, but what was really great when their small group community could also be a part of that engagement with them. And then that really helped us shape, for them to understand, oh yeah, like we're supporting them in this other space that they're invested in. And for me, of course, my conversation was often around, hey, how do you see this as a place for you to actually live out your faith and loving Jesus and loving others really intentionally. And so that was kind of the movement that I took with my kids who were really engaged in sports and activities.
Lisa, maybe you can speak to this, but when I hear that, or Sid, you can jump back in. There's a couple leaders that are like, "Ooh, that sounds like a lot more that I could offer, like extra time, showing up early. Like my commitment is so far just kind of like to this program night, and maybe there's a little bit extra that I can do outside of that." And so, would you say in those settings that the leader should try to help recruit a new leader that can, their commitment is to like the early morning Bible study? Or is there another way with, if you have a limited time, to still build that connection to these kids that are in sports? I don't know, Lisette, if you want to jump on that one or if you want to throw it back to Sid.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just lots of ways to slice it. I think to what Sid was saying, I think the program should never be the end, right? The program is purely a means to an end. And if the end is I can't reach students, then I need to figure out how to readjust what I'm doing. And so I think, yeah, it could be recruiting other leaders that have different time availability. It could be, I was a big fan of, when possible, decentralizing our small groups to do similar things to what you were doing, Sid.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I think if anything we have learned over the last season is there's a lot of ways for us to connect with people that don't require us even being in person. And so how are you thoughtfully pursuing a kid, encouraging a kid, and finding a way to be a part of a kid's life for when they have to be in other spaces? And I think not to be scared of that and not to be bothered by that. I think we sometimes, as leaders, feel this tension of like, my numbers need to look good, right? Let's be really honest. I want everyone there. And so there's this pressure for what we're doing here, but maybe that's the wrong question to be asking anyway. Like, how many kids are we impacting and helping them to impact the environments that they're in? And I think even like, I just keep thinking, Sid, as you're talking about it, like there's this psychological thing to all of this as well. There's an immense amount of pressure on kids these days. There's immense amount of pressure for them to perform, for them to be excellent, for them to really have some other things. And honestly, a lot of those other things are great for them. When you think about mental health, I would love kids to be involved in sports. It's so good for their bodies and their minds, right? I'd love for them to be involved in all kinds of things. But when the church becomes one more place that's just disappointed in them if they don't show up, and we start putting that kind of pressure on them, I don't think we're actually helping. We're actually doing the opposite, right? So how do we think seasonally about what sports do to affect our program flow? How do we think, I've been in some pretty high pressure, like high performing sports arenas. The States has a way of breeding that. And we had to reschedule our whole like summer camp program because I did think experience and showing up at things was super valuable. And I was like, okay, when do I have dark days? Like, when do our sports all have, like, is there any? And so we would just adjust our calendar to try to find a way to make it as accessible to kids as possible.
Lisette, when you're talking about that, there's a couple of things that quickly come to my mind as well. I love that. I love the vision. I think when we show up with our kids in sports also, like there's a huge pressure, like any program, to actually become an identity for a young person. By the way, that can even happen with our youth group. Our youth group can become an identity for our young people in a really unhealthy way. But what happens, I think, or the possibility that can happen is when we begin to like invest in our kids while they're in some of those spaces, we actually become the community that can be the primary shaper of identity for that young person. And then that activity is simply an environment where they get to live out that identity. And I think that's really important for kids. I think the need for that community to continue to fight to be with them is important. Now, I want to be careful. We don't shape our whole youth ministry around one child. That's not what I'm saying. And with the same type of intentionality, we want to work with our other kids. We do invest in individuals, though. So I think there can be something really, really significant when we can go with our kids or go to our kids, when we can have that movement. I love what you said, Jer, recruit more leaders. I just, some of the youth ministries, we've often thought, so from some youth ministries, you go, man, if I get one leader for every 10 kids, that would just be amazing. And we know that that's not helpful. And then there's some spaces where, we have these neat recruiting seasons where we got 2 leaders in every small group. We don't need any more. So let's pause. And I'm like, oh, never pause. Let's just get more leaders in there. Let's train them better so they can be really intentional. If we have a 1-to-1 ratio in our youth ministry with healthy leaders who are present for the right reasons, that's going to be a great youth ministry. And then we can actually be a little bit more flexible to go with our kids in the spaces they're in. And that's not only important for the identity and faith formation of the young person, but again, we have a chance to then actively be with them, helping them think missionally where they are, or even just have a sense that while I'm here, I'm also, connected with another community that shares a different set of values. And I think that's big. The other thing I want to say too, and this has been in our case, so this is our family. Jen and I are sports nuts. We've been involved, Lisette, in the same way that you guys are there, and our boys both have played basketball, and right now Cole is playing like high level provincial basketball, and it's a big deal for him, and he's actually kind of set up life after high school with his sports. What's been really great is in our youth ministry, while he can't attend for his age group all the time, he's actually serving in junior high. And so I love that too. I think there was a time where we used to say, hey, if you can't show up, you can't serve. But I think, again, allowing him to be invested in serving where he can and kind of positioning them in that space is really helpful for their commitment to the church, being involved with the church, and just being in that space for them is really important for their shaping as well. So I think there's lots. I just want to be careful. I love what you said, Lisette. We're not here to serve the program. That's actually not our goal. We have to check our own kind of issues that we're dealing with when we always want to when we're worried about the numbers. I get that. I think that's really intelligent. But when our programs are here to serve us in the faith formation of our young people, we can really think outside of our normative boxes. And in this day and age, man, do we ever have to think outside of our normative boxes?
Okay, this is really good. So let me try to recap a little bit what I'm hearing here, and then would love to hear any last words that you guys have got on this. So Lisette, yeah, you did come out with that really, I think, core truth that kind of reigns over all of this, and that's as volunteer youth workers, we're called to shepherd and lead students towards Jesus, and the program is often how we do it, but it doesn't have to be the way that we do it. So when we think about mentoring students who don't regularly attend, we're still called to do that mentorship work for all of these kids, all of these students that want, to be a part of what we're up to in our youth ministry, in our ministry. So setting that as like core thing number one. And then as a part of that, Sid, you mentioned, let's try and find other ways to go to them. So if it's creating an early morning gathering, if it's maybe a group chat, if we show up at their program events, to again, show them that their like sporting events, that we care about them, that will be a really valuable thing. So find other places outside of our program to actually go to them. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is if there are other spaces, so if it's not our youth ministry, maybe it's a volunteer opportunity, maybe it's something that happens on a Sunday morning at a different time that's more accessible. Let's try to be creative on how we can be in physical space with these students so that they can experience the kind of community that may not be at like the regular youth program, but it might be at something else, but it's still going to be really valuable for them to be connected. So, and then number 4 maybe is like, let's recruit more volunteers.
Yeah. And let me give you a number 5 as well. I love the recruitment of volunteers, but let's think about mentoring that young person. If we can, mentoring that young person as they're involved in other activities, but not just mentoring them, bringing community to them as well. And I think those are 2 different types of experiences that are really important when your community can continue to celebrate a journey with kids. They can feel like a greater sense of belonging to the community that shares the values or that we want to see them embody, as opposed to that other community that they're in that may not share the values, but where they're living a little bit more missionally. I think it's important to keep them included in community, not just in a mentored relationship. So I think that's also a really important piece of.
And then we'll throw to Lisette for you for the last word. But Sid, that makes me think that I know in my youth ministries over the years, sometimes I've felt threatened by students that disengage or families, and like they're requesting like, hey, I need you to bend over backwards for the sake of my kid. And that oftentimes rubs me the wrong way. Like, hey, we're doing a good thing here. Like, if you don't want to be a part of it, that's your deal. But I wonder if it's even worthwhile as youth workers to have that more of that servant posture and honestly being willing to be taken advantage of a little bit by parents with busy schedules with their kids. Because to be honest, the goal that we're trying to accomplish is worth any kind of sacrifice we could make on our part, even if it's like, oh yeah, we're bending over backwards, but we're doing it for the faith of this kid. And that's actually worth bending over backwards to make it work. And so maybe that's just a little heart check, even in the midst of being frustrated when it feels like you're giving a lot and you're not getting much from that family. That's okay. Still stay in it. It's still worth it for the sake of the faith of this kid. And hopefully you can see great things come out of that in the coming years and months ahead.
Man, Jer, I love that so much. And I think there's something really valuable there. And here's the deal. Our kids are going through adolescence. They have all sorts of dreams and ideas. You know what? They really do. They want to be pro athletes, whatever. For most of them, this dream is never going to take place. But if we can stay with them in the journey and that dream collapses, then they have a place where they really do belong that they can fall into. And again, I think having a little bit of a long-term picture can be really helpful, where we see our youth ministry not just making a difference for a kid in this stage of their life, but also, being a place that's how do I want to say this? That's actually going to make a difference for their future as well, as their life continues to change and shift through the process. Yeah, I think that's really great.
All right, Lisette, take us home.
That's so good. Yeah, I just keep thinking as we're saying all of this, like, you can never underestimate the impact of a consistent adult who loves Jesus and loves a kid in their life. Like, you can never underestimate that. And so I think, I love Reggie Joiner always says, do for one what you wish you could do for all. And I just think if God puts a kid on your heart, in your life, in your care, then do for them what you wish. You can't do it for everybody, but that's why we have teams, right? What can you do for that kid to show up consistently? And I think to what you're saying, Sid, they won't always play that sport, probably, right? Statistically, chances are pretty low. They're going to change their mind. They're going to do some different things. But if they know that anytime they encounter you, that they're loved and they belong and you'll point them towards Jesus, like, you have no idea what that impact of that consistency can have. So it's worth it.
That's great. If you guys have things that you want to add or questions you want to dig in on with this, or even comments to today's episode, you can drop us a line, head to youthministry.team. And otherwise, we'll see you back here next time for another episode of the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast.